What's wrong, Drew?
Dude, I don't know. I'm just kind of scared right now.
You're scared?
Yeah.
Why are you scared?
Dude, it's Halloween right now.
It is Halloween.
It's Halloween.
And your costume is terrifying.
Thank you. So is yours, man. Today we're going to talk about something that's pretty frightening, actually, and that is civil procedure.
That's terrifying. Civil procedure is easily the most terrifying class you will take.
Oh, 1L year, it really did. I was horrified.
It was horrifying, and I don't know why. I mean, our law school was split up into two sections when we were at 1Ls, and both professors for civil procedure were amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like I liked the other section's professor, even though I never had him, and I liked our professor as well. But just the subject.
Yeah, it's vitally important. Both professors were wonderful.
It's constantly changing.
And there's so many rules, it seems like. But we're going to make it easy here for you today. So with that said, welcome to Below the Bar podcast. My name is Drew, and as always with me is
Corbin.
And again, we're going to be talking about civil procedure, namely personal jurisdiction, and the famous case...
International Shoe v. Washington.
International Shoe v. Washington. So just a general overview of jurisdiction of federal courts. So there's two ways that courts can exercise jurisdiction, and that is personal jurisdiction, which we'll be talking about today, and...
Yeah, there's personal jurisdiction and also subject matter jurisdiction.
Right, which we'll discuss subject matter jurisdiction more in following episodes.
Yeah, we're going to try to make this into, a 2 or 3 episode...
mini-series.
Yeah, where we talk about the different jurisdictions and what goes on in each one.
Yeah, but so today, as I said, we're talking about personal jurisdiction. I just want to give you guys some quick notes on personal jurisdiction. Just a quick definition. So before a court can exercise power over a party, that party must have certain minimum contacts with the forum in which the court sits. What does that mean? We're going to tell you guys when we go through International Shoe. There's one other thing that I think it might be nice to know about personal jurisdiction, which is waiver.
Yeah, you can waive personal jurisdiction. The waiver doesn't have to be an explicit waiver by the defendant. Just showing up to court without objecting to personal jurisdiction is enough for the court to assume that the defendant has waived any challenge of personal jurisdiction.
Yeah, so you can just say, I don't care about it. I'm here. Let's do this.
Let's do this thing.
Tell
me, am I guilty or not?
Yeah, tell me right now. Quick, come on. I got stuff to do. All right?
Come on.
Your Honor.
Car's running.
Yeah. So, without further ado, International Shoe v. Washington. This is probably the quintessential case in Civ Pro regarding personal jurisdiction.
Yeah, it's a big one, and it's great. Just basically how they determine that there is personal jurisdiction. But we can start with a little bit of the facts of the case. So International Shoe was incorporated in Delaware. Their main factory, or maybe their only factory,
the principal place of business, we'll just say,
was in Missouri. And then I believe they had 12 or 13 agents that would sell shoes, gather samples of shoes in Washington state.
Right, yeah, so that's really where that last part is important here, because that's where this whole debacle kind of stems from. International Shoe, they manufacture shoes, and as Corbin said, they're incorporated in Delaware and all that great stuff. So they do maintain places of business in other states, other than Washington.
Right, yeah. I guess the way that I think of these salesmen in the state of Washington is we all know those girls, generally girls in from high school, that are now part of whatever pyramid scheme caught their eye as soon as they graduate, whether it is a beauty product. I know I've seen some weight loss products, but they are all very vocal about it on Facebook, Instagram, whatever social media they can, and it just kind of seems like they are almost in a cult.
Yeah, pyramid scheme.
Yeah, they rave about this product and all the great things, but just everybody else outside of it recognizes that they're just in a pyramid scheme.
Yeah. quick side note about pyramid schemes. I did have a buddy when I was right out of high school who called me to come over to his place one night. He goes, "Hey, I got this really cool thing I wanted to show you." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, whatever." And I get there, and it's my buddy, another guy that we hang out with, who I will just sidestep here and say, this is a man that once wore, on numerous occasions, so not just once, an Argyle sweater vest with nothing on underneath because he thought that was class. So when I get to this, whatever is going on, Argyle sweater vest is sitting there in a suit and tie. I'm very confused. Turns out he's trying to sell me on a pyramid scheme. It was Amway?
Amway, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been contacted by people before I moved down here. I was in a Dunkin' Donuts one time, and this guy came up to me in line and asked me if I wanted to talk about a business opportunity. And I was like, oh, like, no, I think I'm good. And he handed me a CD. I went back, popped it in my computer. It was Amway. And I was like, I just immediately was like, yeah, I saw that coming.
Listen here, Timmy, unless your business plan is me getting donuts for half price, I don't want to hear it.
Right.
I'm
good. I'll pass.
Get it away from me. So let's get back to the case. I'm sorry, guys. So, International Shoe, they have no office in Washington State, nor do they make any contracts for sale or purchase. There is no stock or merchandise, and there are no deliveries in interstate commerce. So, based off of this, it just kind of seems crazy to even suggest that Washington would have jurisdiction over this. So, how is it that Washington is trying to argue that personal jurisdiction exists?
Yeah, they try to argue basically that the salesmen there, like I said, they collect samples and they meet with people to possibly buy these shoes. And whenever they find a possible client, they'll rent out hotel rooms basically to go and show all of their clients all the different types of shoes or any samples that they have. And then this is all an expense of International Shoe. Like, they reimburse their salesmen.
Sure.
So Washington argues that there's personal jurisdiction there because International Shoe is basically refusing that they have to pay into any of the Washington state taxes.
Yeah, so Washington has this unemployment compensation plan in which the costs are provided by contributions that are required by employers to a state unemployment compensation fund.
Right.
So International Shoe was not paying. So Washington sues them to say, hey, that's where this case is coming from. Washington sues International Shoe because International Shoe was not paying the proper taxation. And then this is where the whole, do we have personal jurisdiction? Do we not have it? And as Corbin noted, there was a lot of things going on in regard to business on behalf of International Shoe in Washington. I actually saw that there was around 13 salesmen that were under direct supervision and control of sales managers located in St. Louis during the 3 years at issue here. So there was 3 years, I think it was 1937 and 1940, where they did not pay into this, and those are the years at issue. I also saw that all the salesmen resided in Washington state, and their activities were confined to that state. They were also compensated by commissions based on their sales, and over the course of 3 years, these salesmen commissions totaled at least $31,000 each year, which is a decent amount of money, especially given the time when this case...
Yeah, I mean, that's a substantial amount of money for somebody to make for supposedly not actually working in the state.
Right. I mean, that's a good amount. I'd be happy with $31,000. You kidding me?
Right.
Yeah. So the salesman showed shoes, as Corbin said, the salesman showed samples and solicited orders on terms fixed by International Shoe. And not to repeat what Corbin said, but they rented sample rooms for the purpose of showing them. And they were reimbursed their expenses for doing so by International Shoe.
Yeah, so because of all of these different things that were, whether it was International Shoe reimbursing them, just based off of all of these facts, the court here said that it was clear that all of these activities established a sufficient contact within Washington state. And based off of this sufficient contact, the personal jurisdiction was there. So Washington had the right to sue International Shoe.
Yeah, and that's the minimum context that we talked about earlier when we gave the definition of personal jurisdiction. But we'll dive a little deeper into this. So the commissioner, the tax commissioner, who was responsible for assessment and collection of contributions to this fund, served an International Shoe employee in Washington State with notice of the suit. This employee was one of the salesmen for International Shoe.
And kind of going back to these pyramid schemes that I was talking about earlier, can you imagine Becky from high school is doing business and then somebody just serves her
Yeah.
on account of Amway?
Yeah.
And now she has to figure out where to go from there? Like, Becky graduated high school and is in a pyramid scheme.
Right. She's not doing so well, guys. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah. Whenever I was reading it, I just thought that was really funny. Like, again, I'm not in a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
But I just can't imagine I'm working for a company and the next thing you know, I'm being served on behalf of the company.
Yeah, and guys, we're also, just to clarify, we're not saying International Shoe was a pyramid scheme.
Right.
We're just saying that reading this case, it's kind of, at least as far as Corbin and I, kind of is reminiscent of one.
Right, yeah. I don't think this was a pyramid scheme, but I think it has a lot of similarities
Sure.
to current day
pyramid
schemes.
So they didn't just serve the salesman. They did mail notice to the employer's address in St. Louis. The Unemployment Office's tribunal ruled that the commissioner was entitled to contributions. And on appeal, this holding was affirmed by both the county superior and the Washington Supreme Court. So this case ended up going all the way to the United States Supreme Court. International Shoe argues that service upon the salesman was improper, that they were not doing business in Washington State, nor did they have a registered agent there, let alone furnish any employment in the state.
Right. And I don't know. Again, I think that's a tough argument to actually succeed on. Like I said, it's only 13 people in the state of Washington.
Yeah.
But still, they're clearly doing fairly well.
Yeah.
Doing enough business to make $31,000. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It just kind of seems like it's very clear that there's business going on
In the
for
state of
international
Washington,
shoe.
right? You know what? The United States Supreme Court agreed. So we'll talk about the Washington Supreme Court here. They went on to kind of say, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so the Washington Supreme Court goes on to say that regular and systematic solicitation of orders in Washington by the salesman resulted in a continuous flow of products into Washington, and that was sufficient to establish International Shoe as doing business there. So this gave Washington personal jurisdiction over International Shoe, again, which is why they are allowed to take them to court for having to not reimburse them, but pay into this unemployment fund.
Right. And that's exactly what you said before, was
Right.
that, it seemed as if they were conducting a substantial, that they met the minimum contact requirement.
Right.
So International Shoe is clearly arguing that these contacts were not sufficient to establish jurisdiction, and that it was a denial of due process to allow the case to be heard in Washington.
Right. And again, I think that's a very tough argument to make, just given the facts. But again, this is a very important case in civil procedure. So obviously there was some legal backing behind their argument. But in the end, the Supreme Court ruled that no, they were allowed to sue International Shoe based off of personal jurisdiction due to the minimum contacts.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to go a little bit further into it just because Justice Black concurred with this hearing, but not because he didn't think Washington State should have personal jurisdiction. Reading the concurrence, it seems like Justice Black believes that if there doesn't have to be that minimum contact. If there is any business done in that state for any reason, they have the right to collect taxes on it, to basically take them to court over anything. So
he's kind of suggesting that this minimum contacts isn't even necessary. Just if anything, or at least that the bar for minimum contacts is very low.
Very low. Yeah,
very low.
He goes on to say that the minimum contacts is diminishing the power of the states.
Oh, okay.
So
Justice Black, he's tough.
any business.
I'm going to go in a little deeper, actually, here. This is just some side research that I did on international shoe. I thought this was kind of interesting. I want to talk historically how personal jurisdiction was handled. And we had this case called Pennoyer. I'm probably saying it wrong, and there's probably somebody right now screaming at me, but it's Pennoyer. We're just going to say that. So that case said in order to have jurisdiction over a person, the person must either voluntarily appear in court, they must be found within the state, reside in the state, or has property in the state that the court has attached. So that's Pennoyer. That's basically that you had to have presence in the state.
Right, yeah. And that was from the 1870s, correct?
It was an old case, yeah. And that's how they handled it for a long time. And that's no longer the case. Courts may exercise personal jurisdiction over a defendant if that defendant has these certain minimum contacts with the jurisdiction, that maintenance of the suit does not offend traditional notions of fair play and substantial justice. Where the defendant is a corporation, here we're talking about international shoe. So where the defendant is a corporation, presence has never been doubted when activities of the corporation in that state have not only been continuous and systematic, but also give rise to liabilities sued on, even if no consent to be sued or authorization of an agent to accept service has been given, which is exactly here. International Shoe was saying we had no agent to accept service. We didn't. That doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, that would just make it very easy for businesses to get rid of any liability that they had.
Yeah.
And just be like, here, we're just going to have salesmen there, no agents.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have anybody to serve process to there, so we cannot be subject to liability there. Yeah, and that's...
Yeah, so also, when a corporation exercises the privilege of conducting activities within a state, they also enjoy the benefits and protection of the laws of that state. But there is a flip side to this rule, just because the exercise of this privilege also results in an obligation to the state.
Right.
Which I think is fair.
Yeah. If you're going to reap the benefits, there's also going to be...
Right.
Yeah.
Again, as we said earlier, based off of Pennoyer, if you just wouldn't put an agent there, you get all the benefits.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter.
No liability. Yeah. So we can clearly see how that's a little troublesome, but ultimately, yeah, we've said this a few times, but just to touch back on it, ultimately the court held that the actions of International Shoe in Washington were in fact systematic and continuous throughout the years of 1937 and 1940. It resulted in a large volume of interstate business in which International Shoe received benefits and protection of the laws of Washington. That included the right to resort to the courts of Washington for enforcement of its rights. So ultimately, appellant having rendered itself amenable to suit upon obligations arising out of the activities of its salesmen in Washington, the state has personal jurisdiction over them to collect tax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really the gist of this case. I hope that it was informative enough and gives anybody that's in civil procedure right now or has taken it, it kind of just helps you remember what personal jurisdiction is. Again, like we've said several times, we want this podcast to be informative, but also we try to find the humor in all of them. So that's why we kind of tie in the pyramid schemes and everything that's going on today.
Just to kind of bring a different look to it.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's funny that International Shoe even tried to argue that they didn't have personal jurisdiction. It's very obvious that they're doing business there.
Especially after reading this case.
Right, yeah. So
that's it, guys. Certain minimum contacts. You mean if you have them, if you have salesmen in a state that are generating revenue, I mean, you're reaping the benefits of the laws of that state.
You're obligated.
You also are obligated to, obligations might arise out of your business dealings there.
As always, if you guys have any cases that you think are funny or think we should touch on, feel free to send them in to us at Below the Bar Podcast on Instagram, and we'll look over all of our recommendations and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. Other than that, have a good Halloween, or I hope you had a good Halloween, because we're recording this on Halloween, so you'll hear it later. But
Yeah, it's not going to air on Halloween, so you guys are probably a little confused about the intro. But you know what? We, here at Below the Bar, celebrate Halloween
we do.
because we're God-fearing Americans.
Is Halloween a God-fearing holiday?
It is now.
Okay, that's cool with me.